Hi guys, so for today's video, I'm going to be ranking the 20 books that I read in the first quarter of the year. And this is not going to be ranking as in giving them 1 to 5 stars. It's not a tier list video. It's truly a, here's my least favorite up through my favorite, because I really want to get down to that very specific, oh no, I like this one the best. I say that, but I have a few on here that have ties. I'm not going to start from the bottom and work my way to the top. I'm not going to start at the top. I'm actually going to start at the middle. So my meh feelings, my lukewarm feelings, they're going to be what we talk about first. And then the further the video goes, the more extreme my feelings get. I am going to, at the end of the video, go on Goodreads and I'm going to see how I feel about them compared to how the average ratings are for all of these books. So I am going to stack them up so that you have a visual representation. I'll take a picture of them stacked with my rating, and then I'll take a picture of them stacked with how Goodreads has rated them so you can see how my tastes differ. One last bit of blabbering from me. I don't own all of these books, so I have used my incredible innovative problem-solving skills to I just wrote the name on them. Finally jumping into it, because I have some ties up toward the top, I'm actually going to start with the number 12 spot. That goes to Nameless Queen. I thought it was really sweet. I thought it was wholesome. It was a good start to finish type of story. It is a little on the younger side, but I liked it. I thought it was a good story. But I didn't love it. I didn't think it was the most creative thing I'd ever come across. It was a good time. I definitely would recommend this to younger readers who are just getting into fantasy. I would recommend it to people who just want something kind of familiar, something that they can read quick and is a good time and has no romance. So it was pretty good for me. Not anything though that I'm going to be constantly shoving down people's throats. In the number 13 spot, we have Geekarella, and it was a buddy read for February because I thought, oh, perfect time, it's Valentine's Day, we'll read something cute and cozy, and that's what this book was, which I think if that's your thing, you'll probably really like this story. In the number 11 spot, we have A Heart So Fierce and Broken. This is a sequel to A Curse So Dark and Lonely, and this one for me, it wasn't quite as much to my liking as the first one. It followed basically different characters throughout the story, and I just liked the characters more in the first one, but I really like this author's writing. It's very engaging, and it was definitely entertaining, and the ending is setting up the third one really well. I definitely can't wait for the third one, but I do think that book might have had middle book syndrome just a little bit. In the number 14 spot, we have Ever the Brave by Erin Summerall. This is also a sequel. It's a sequel to Ever the Hunted. I thought the romance in the story, I'm not really a romance reader, but the romance in the story I really liked it. But there's a lot of tropes that I don't think that the author wrote them in a way that I really liked. There's some tropes that I think, generally speaking, a lot of people don't love. I wanted more of the world. I wanted more of the antagonist, and we didn't get that as much. I have a tie for 9 and 10. I feel like some of you who absolutely hate this story are gonna be like, I don't want to even listen to what you have to say for the rest of this. This should be at the bottom. I don't know. Maybe you guys will. Maybe some of you really love it. But you know what? I don't hate the Grisha trilogy. I think that it is a story that is definitely more geared toward a younger audience, but man, I think it's a good entry point into fantasy, especially for younger readers. And yes, the main character, she's kind of annoying, but I feel like she's understandably annoying, and she's definitely so insecure, which I think is hard. It's not that I have no insecurities, and I think a lot of people have insecurities, but I think when you get older, you're just kind of like, well, what can I do about them? Nothing, so who cares? But when you're younger, it's like all consuming, and I think that her being a younger character, and she places so much of her worth based on the things she's insecure about, I think that's something that's it made me think about when I was younger. And I also think people who are younger are going to relate to that. And the poor girl, she gets thrust into some stuff that she was not ready for. And a lot of people are like, oh, Alina, she's so stupid. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't know what to do in these situations. I feel like she's trying. At least she's trying. So I always enjoy coming back to them. They were rereads for me. And so I just, I don't hate them. In the 15 spot, we have Scavenge the Stars. I didn't hate this book at all. It was a Count of Monte Cristo retelling, and there were elements of it that I really liked. I'll absolutely check out more by this author. I think she handled the gambling issues, the addiction issues one of the characters has. I thought she handled that really well, and I really liked one of the main characters, Amaya, but I didn't feel that connected to the story. It's a revenge story, and I think revenge stories, for some people, they totally love them, and they're always down for a good revenge story, but for me, I have to really feel like I want the bad guy to go down, and I just didn't really feel like that very much with this story. Next up in the 8 spot would be The Queens of Innis Lear by Tessa Gratton. This is a King Lear retelling. I'm really not familiar with the original story, so I didn't know what to expect. And the only thing that really keeps this book from being higher on this list is that it's so boring. It's so incredibly boring, but the writing is stunning. The writing is so beautiful, and man, the family dynamics and drama in this story they're so nuanced. Another extremely beautifully written story, so well written, would be All the Light We Cannot See, which is taken the number 16 spot. It's very tragic, but there's a magical realism element to this story that I just was like, I don't need this in this story, and it became more prevalent the more the story progressed. And every time that it started to become a thing, I was like, ugh, it pulled me out of the story. So even though I think this book is absolutely fantastic, I completely understand why it has won, I think it's won possibly multiple awards, but it's definitely an award-winning book. I agree with that. I think the writing's great. The research, the characterization, oh my gosh, so good. But for my personal enjoyment, I ended up not really liking it that much because of this. There's stuff with the diamond. I feel like from here on out, everything is going to feel super messed up. Like, it feels messed up to put the next few books above All the Light We Cannot See, but taking the 6 and 7 spot, we have All the Stars and Teeth, and then The Shadows Between Us. And Shadows Between Us was just pure entertainment. And sometimes you really need that in a story. It feels so wrong, though, to put that above All Light We Cannot See, because that is an impactful, powerful story. And this is a story about a girl who's trying to, like, seduce somebody for power. And it's a ridiculous premise for subjective enjoyment. I did really have a good time with this one. I think that All the Stars and Teeth beats it out just a little bit, because I think as far as a really well-crafted world and the descriptions and the characters themselves being flawed but likable, all that kind of stuff, I think that this one did that really well. All Stars and Teeth. I mean, this one it was exactly what I was wanting it to be, which was great. But this one, I think, for me, is maybe one that I'm going to be more excited. Like, I was about to say if I had to reread one, but man, this one was a good time. That's why they're tied, because I get really indecisive. Oh man, okay, going into the number 17 spot would be The Lies of Locke Lamora. I thought I was gonna love this book. So many fantasy fans are always talking about how good it is, how good the friendships are, how great the world building is for this contained setting. So I thought I was gonna love it. Obviously, I didn't. Another thing that really was part of why I think this ranks even lower is that I didn't like any of the characters. I'm a very character-driven reader. I didn't really like any of the characters. I didn't mind the flashbacks initially because there's a lot of those in this story, but eventually they got to a point where they just interrupted the flow of what was going on in the present, and for reasons I didn't feel like were particularly necessary. I felt like this story was strangely, not juvenile, like immature, but like there were times that it wasn't particularly poetic or anything, where it was just almost over the top, but so gross sometimes, coupled with like very interesting humor. I don't know, somebody described it as like a Quentin Tarantino movie. I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of Quentin Tarantino, so maybe that'll tell you whether you'll like it or not. Next, we have another tie, and that would be A Curse So Dark and Lonely and Vengeful, which are two very, very different books. Vengeful is one of those stories that for me, it just got gray characters and villainous characters right. I really enjoyed following them. I really like the split timeline, the way that V.E. Schwab utilizes it. So for me, it was surprisingly good too. I was like, oh wow, I'd heard mixed things, and then I went into it and I was like, I really like this. So I was excited about that. A Curse So Dark and Lonely, I'd heard pretty much nothing but good things, and it lived up to the hype, which was that's always great when that happens. So really enjoyed this one. I feel like I was into it from the beginning. I really liked the characters. I thought the pacing was great. So it was really fun for me. So those two locked. I'm gonna go ahead and do 18 and 19. 18 for me would be Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is a standalone that I was really excited for because I don't see too many standalones in adult fantasy, and I'd heard really good things. But I'd also had some people say they hated it, and I was like, whoa, really? And usually when that happens, I end up being somewhere in the middle. Not with this one. I also really didn't like it. I didn't like the character. There wasn't a lot I liked. I mean, the folklore elements, the setting, I liked that. But pretty much everything else just didn't work for me at all. The 19 spot goes to Trader's Blade. This one started strong. I thought I was gonna love it. It seemed like it was gonna be such a fun adventure with bromances and stuff, and it was that initially, but the more the story went, it felt like it didn't have a ton of direction. And I'm not necessarily saying that it needed to be extremely plot driven and I had to know, like, this is what's gonna happen. It's not that. It just, things would happen so randomly that had no foreshadowing, in my opinion. And they weren't alluded to. Things would happen and then you'd be told, like, this is what's up. And then you'd be like, oh, okay. And then you just kind of had to go with that. And there's just some things that the way certain things were handled in the story that weren't really to my liking, but it definitely, man, it had like a fun vibe. It had a fun vibe, but then would be super violent sometimes. And I guess that's not my thing, because that was kind of the case in Liza Lockelmora too. I actually feel like if you like Liza Lockelmora, you'll probably really like this one, and not just because I didn't like both of these, but because there are elements of them that I think are somewhat similar. For spots 2 and 3, we have another tie. I just could not decide between the two of these for very different reasons, but we have Night of the Dragon and Ember Queen. They're both conclusions to trilogies. So I find that if you can really nail the end of a series, it's probably gonna be a favorite for me, and that was the case with both of these. The reason they're tied is I have different things about them that I really liked. I think Night of the Dragon, I ended up really liking the relationship between the two main characters a lot. And it was more, they were both emotional. That's the thing. They were both emotional. I felt like this one, it was more focused on the two main characters. This one's a single point of view story, but I think there was a lot of focus in the end on the antagonist. And it's like a rebellion and everything. This one was like all battles pretty much at the end. And this one's a lot of like plotting and stuff like that. So both were great. Both I was so pleased with. I was emotional reading them. I think, oh man, it's hard because this one's fresher in my mind. So in my mind, I'm like more emotional right now about this one. And I can't tell if that's because the ending truly was more emotional for me or because it's right there. All right. I never thought this would happen, but my least favorite read in the first 3 months was a Brandon Sanderson book, and that would be Steelheart. I did not like this book. I thought it had a great start. Oh man, I was so into it when it first started. The premise, I really liked the premise, but it just, I didn't like this book. The more that it went on, the less I liked it. I actually thought for a while that Trader's Blade was going to be lower than this one. But I had a moment toward the end of Trader's Blade where I was like, maybe he's going to bring it home and then I'll like it more. And I never had that with this one. With this one, I was like, it's Sanderson, so he'll probably blow my mind and then do something that I'm like, oh, okay, that was really cool. And then that never happened. And I just like continued to not really like it. So because that one thought with Trader's Blade, I was like, oh, I think that's got to be what determines me liking that one more than this one. If you like Trader's Blade, if you like any of the ones I've ranked low, Steelheart, Liza Lockelmora, Uprooted, I really thought I was going to love all of those books. I thought I was going to love them, and I'm shocked that they are not at the top. It's weird. It's very bizarre. Looking at, if you told me, like, this is going to be how you feel about these books, I'd be like, no way. But that's where we're at. Now time for the grand finale, the book that I loved the most. I was not expecting to even really like this book, and then I loved it. And you know what? It's up there with Hero of Ages for me, because that's the only other book that has ever made me this emotional, and that would be Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. This story was, for me, it was perfect. There was nothing I didn't like about this book. It's a standalone. It's powerful, impactful, emotional. I've never almost cried so many times. So I love the Hero of Ages, third book in the Mistborn series. But that book, it's like, it's the end of something. And the way things turn out is, it's like devastating, but hopeful. And it's very emotional at the end. But I wouldn't say it was emotional throughout the whole last book. But this book, man, like pretty much from the beginning, I was wanting to cry. And I didn't cry. I've never cried reading a book. But that's because I had to hold back tears. There were times in this book that I was like really getting close, and I had to really try not to cry. So if I had just let it go and let myself cry, I would have sobbed. I would have sobbed with this one. But I don't think that's going to be the case for everybody. It's got some magical realism. A lot of people don't really like that. I don't really like that. But it worked. Everything about this book just totally worked for me. I kind of have two stacks going on right now, so I'm going to stack them up all the way from least favorite to favorite, give you some visuals of that. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to redo it all based off of the Goodreads ratings, then put them side to side so that you can see how my feelings compare to average feelings. And I'll try not to get too upset when I see some of my favorites low. I went back through and I rearranged the books, restacked them based off of the Goodreads ratings. And from bottom to top, we have Queens of Innisleer, Nameless Queen, Scavenge the Stars, Kingdom of Back, Ever the Brave, All the Stars and Teeth, Geekerella, Grisha, Shadows Between Us, Traitor's Blade, Uprooted, Ember Queen, A Heart So Fierce and Broken, Steelheart, A Curse So Dark and Lonely, Vengeful, Lies of Locke Lamora, Night of the Dragon, and All the Light We Cannot See. Given that there were 20 books on this list and I had some very different opinions and feelings about some of these books than I knew a lot of other people did, I wasn't really expecting to have any of them be the same, but there were actually, depending on where you put some of the books that I had as ties, depending on where you put those, I actually did end up having some that were right on. Night of the Dragon is in the number 2 spot for both lists. Same goes for Vengeful and A Curse So Dark and Lonely. I mentioned that A Curse So Dark and Lonely, I'd heard a lot of good things, and then I thought it lived up to the hype. So it looks like I'm right there with everybody else. I'm very basic in that regard. And then the one that surprised me that lined up was Vengeful, because I'd heard mixed things about that one, but it turns out the average rating is very high, and then I thought highly of it, so they lined up. The book Geekerella was basically the same. There was only one book different between those two, so I kind of count that one as being the same, especially because Goodreads ratings fluctuate from one day to the next. So maybe, depending on the day, it would have been in the place that I'd put it. Now for the juicy ones, the ones that I look at and I'm like, why? So Queens of Innisleer, it was boring. It was so boring, but it's so good. The writing is really phenomenal, and it's so poetic and beautiful, and I just feel like that book's average rating is so low. I wrote down the exact number. It's 3.57. It does not deserve that low of a rating, in my humble opinion. Steelheart's number 6 on this list based off of the Goodreads ratings. Obviously, I ranked it at the very bottom. So I don't think it's fair to try and say, oh, people like it just because it's Brandon Sanderson. But I have seen reviews where people were like, I'll give him a pass, wasn't as strong as his other works, but still love him. I see reviews like that, so it's kind of hard for me to not think that people perhaps rated higher because they love Sanderson so much. People asked me after my review if, and I understand them asking this, they thought, did I feel so negatively toward it because because I went in with such high expectations. I'm such a big fan of pretty much all his other works. And actually, the answer was the opposite. I only kept going because it was Sanderson, and I kept expecting for it to turn around and for it to blow my mind and be amazing and have all these amazing twists and reveals. And he usually has this way of flipping tropes on their head, so I was kind of expecting that something to that extent was going to happen, and I just felt like it never did. And like I said before, I just felt like it continuously went downhill for me, and it's kind of shocking to see that this book has such a high rating. I also think you know what, I'm a little salty because I see a lot of people say, there are some things that are true of adult fantasy and sci-fi and some things that are true of young adult science fiction and fantasy. And a lot of times people, they take those things and they believe it's true of all of the books in those age categories and genres. And I see so many people act like young adults is this negative, ridiculous, everything's over the top, everybody just falls in love for no reason, it's dumb, the dialogue's dumb, the writing's bad, all that kind of stuff. And yet I see a lot of those kinds of people say the only young adult I'll read. I'll pick up Brandon Sanderson though. His stuff is different. And to me, the negative stereotypes about the young adult age range are so true in that book. And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense to me that people are going to pick that up. And that's like the exception when there's so many other young adult books that are super powerful or meaningful or fun and adventurous. I don't know. I get it. I get if it's not your thing to read certain age ranges. I have a lot of hit or miss when it comes to middle grade because sometimes I am like, it's a little young for me. But yeah, I don't get why Sanderson's books are the exception when, at least with Steelheart, it felt kind of like the rule. I completely understand why All the Light We Cannot See is at the top of the average ratings, and I placed it relatively low. I was very honest in saying that I do think it's a fantastically written book, but there were elements to it I didn't care for. The opposite's kind of true with Steelheart. Steelheart's one of those books where I know deep down that everything's subjective and it's all personal taste, but that's one of those books that I'm like, why? Like, I don't get it. I don't get why so many people love it. It's fast-paced and it's fun, but I'm like, there's lots of fast-paced books that are super fun. Anyway, All the Light We Cannot See, I get it. I do wonder, and I hate that I wonder this, but I'm curious if you guys are like this too. Full transparency, I wonder how many people pick that book up, see that it won a Pulitzer Prize, and then also it's got a really deep subject matter, and then that kind of automatically maybe increases their ratings for it. Do you guys think maybe it being like highly regarded by lots of people is perhaps part of why the rating continues to be so high? The last one that I'll point out that is quite different would be The Lies of Locke Lamora. I ranked it quite low, and it is quite high on this list. And this is one of those books where, with All the Light We Cannot See, I do understand why it's ranked so high. With Steelheart, I don't really. And then with this one, I'm like, it's not that I don't think that it's going to appeal to people, it's that I'm surprised it's appealed to so many people. So for roughly four books on this list, I was very basic, and I had basically the same thoughts as the average population did. And then for some other ones, I was a total hipster. I didn't like the cool thing. Let me know what your favorite and your least favorite thing was that you read in the first 3 months of the year. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Stay healthy, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.